1. Greetings and salutations. Let me first give some background information about myself, in case that plays a role. Location, Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon. Race, Native and European. Family history with the paranormal. My father and grandmother, and one of her fathers or mothers, have had frequently alleged encounters with the supernatural, to my knowledge. Religious background. Was born into being a Jehovah's Witness, but never believed in it from the moment I was conscious about the world. I consider myself currently agnostic. I have never really subscribed to the idea of religion. Education and profession. Computer science. Okay, now that's out of the way, I have been becoming more curious about my personal experiences, and if they have any meaning behind them. All of my encounters with the supernatural have been positive, besides one experience. I don't count having a feeling about something as a direct encounter. I see that more as a sensation about the supernatural. When it comes to that, I'd say my experiences are 50-50, some good, some bad. My gut tells me something is looking out for me. My earliest premonition was when I was a child, around 6 or 7, I think. It was late at night, and I went outside to check up on my dad, assuming he was working on the car outside with his friends. No one was there. They went to get beer. Before I turned around, my body froze and turned towards the tall bushes in complete darkness, something signaling to my brain that there was someone dangerous in that direction. All of a sudden, a man covered in black and a mask jumps out of the bush. We locked eyes for at least 10 seconds, seeing what each other was going to do. He ended up sprinting away once he realized I wasn't going to yell. I ran inside instantly, locking all the doors and windows, naturally acting like nothing happened. My second encounter with the supernatural that I can remember was when I was out during service with my parents, when I was still technically a Jehovah's Witness. We came across the house of a self-proclaimed witch. I was alone in the car with my brother with the car's electrical system on, so we could use the AC. The car wasn't on. Apparently my father and the witch kinda got into a slight friendly argument, and she wanted to show a glimpse of her power. All of a sudden, the car radio station started shifting fast. All the stations started blending together into gibberish, and all the lights in and outside of the car started going crazy, dimming in and out fast and randomly. After a few seconds, I opened the door to disconnect the current, and everything stopped. My parents came back to the car, and we never went to that home again. The car was basically brand new and has never given us problems to this day, besides that day. I got a job in my teenage years as a lifeguard. Some of my friends told me about a girl that haunted the pool. I thought they were crazy. One night, 6 of us decided to stay after closing and do some night swimming. Our ages ranged from 16 to 20, both male and female. We swam for about an hour and a half and decided it was time to leave. On our way out, we passed by this slim, narrow hallway that leads to the front of the building. A song is on the radio, when the woman singing goes, "Na na na." As we pass the hallway, we hear the clear voice of a little girl singing, "Na na na," off tune from the radio, so we all knew it wasn't an echo from the pool deck. We all froze still for a few seconds, all looking at each other, making sure we heard the same thing. After the initial shock, we ran. And ran fast. To the staff locker room, where we all cowered for the next 8 minutes, not sure about what we should do. Eventually, we left and didn't encounter anything again for that day. At school, I was in my AP biology class when I got this intense feeling that my brother was injured in some manner. To what extent, I wasn't sure, but it was all I could think about. A few seconds later, the phone rings in the class. Before the teacher even picks it up, I shoot out of my chair and walk towards the door, and as I'm about to leave the classroom, she tells me, "It's for you," and I said I know. I end up walking directly towards the nursery where my brother was being attended to. He cut himself in the workshop with a blade. Ended up needing stitches, but it all worked out in the end. However, it wasn't until after that I realized how weird that all was. This last experience is something that freaks me out to this day, just because I'm not sure who or what is looking out for me. Back at the pool a few years later, I believe it was the spring of 2019, I was lifeguarding a night shift. It was any other night shift, nothing out of the ordinary. Just a bland, boring day. All of a sudden, I feel a cold shiver start at the base of my spine and travel up toward my head, eventually, the feeling engulfing my whole body. And I hear a voice say, "You're going to get hurt. You should leave." Then the feeling went away. It didn't feel like a hostile or angry voice. It felt like someone trying to give me a heads up and do me a solid by looking out for me. Still, I was obviously shaken up, not knowing if I should follow my instinct or just ignore it because I'd sound crazy otherwise. I was about to ask my manager for the rest of the night off, but decided to stay because I thought I was overreacting to something that wasn't real. Closing time comes and everything goes smoothly. We leave the facility and head out for our individual cars and hop in. I'm sitting in my 2007 yellow Mustang, making sure all of my coworkers leave safely. Once the last person leaves, I turn on my ignition and start heading home. A block away from the pool, while I cross the intersection, there's a car heading straight towards me, moving at least 60 miles an hour on a residential street. I look out the corner of my eyes, catching a glimpse of it. In that moment, I have two options: either floor it and try to move quickly out of the way, or to whip my car to the left in order to try and dodge it. Somehow, instinctively, I make the right choice. The only choice that would have saved my life that night. I whip the car to the left, and they still hit me. But as I am turning, they hit my front right fender at the perfect angle and speed, almost safely pushing me away from them, making my car spin out completely. But that was the best-case scenario, because there was another car racing them that I didn't see to the right. If I would have floored it, I most definitely would have been hit twice by two fast-moving cars head-on. I should have died that night, statistically. The fact that everyone in that accident walked away with life and not a scratch on them is something I can't explain. After the adrenaline wore off, I couldn't help thinking that the voice that told me to leave early was trying to help me. And if so, who? What? Why was that? Any insight into my experiences and what that says about me would be greatly appreciated. 2. It's a scary story, and violent, so content warning, not recommended for younger users. My house had strange energy growing up, always did. But when I had turned 10, my mom made the worst decision in her life. She bought me a Ouija board, because I saw one online and I was begging for one, so I got one for my 10th birthday party. I held it at a friend's house, her little trailer. There was about 6 of us, all about 10 or 11 years old. We played the Ouija board in her kitchen, which was connected to her back living room. Her back living room had extremely scary vibes to it, and I never slept back there because of it, just for reference. So, we started asking questions after we lit a bunch of candles. We contacted a woman named Abby. She spelled out words that were violent and horrible. I'll just say that. After spelling out that she died because of someone else doing something bad to her, if you know what I mean, the candles went out. We were in the complete dark. Nobody blew out the candles, and we all screamed, and everyone started crying. So a while goes by, and me and my friend Alex continue playing with this board, talking with Abby. She told us that she was a young girl who passed away in a violent way, and that she was angry and wanted to harm us too. The next day, I get a message from my friend saying, "Whatever I did to her at the sleepover wasn't funny, and she hates me now." Dramatic 10-year-olds. I had no idea what she was talking about. She sent a photo of a large scratch on her back. I continued receiving things like this from my friends, then it happened to me. 3 large red marks on my back, like claws. A while goes by, and honestly, I'm struggling to remember what happened. I recall Abby said she wanted a body, so I bought her a doll. The doll had light brown curly hair, a red bow, an older Victorian red velvet dress, and green-brown eyes. Her skin was porcelain and very fragile. The doll would move around on its own, and I always became uncomfortable around it. The older I got, the less activity happened. I thought she had left me entirely for a while, until I saw a psychic and she told me I had an extremely dark energy attached to me. She said it wasn't a little girl, as Abby came off as a younger girl or woman usually. She said it was most likely a demonic energy. I used sage and everything trying to get rid of it. For a while this worked. Then when I was 14, I bought dowsing rods and was messing around with them with my friends at school. Boarding school, so I wasn't home. My friend was talking to her male cousin who had passed away, and all of a sudden, my other friend screams. She turns around and said something I will never forget. "She hurt me." We looked at her back, and we saw blood everywhere. After that, we closed the rod session, and I went into a full-blown panic attack and explained everything about Abby. These girls never even knew about her, and the one girl who got scratched said she had been dreaming about the doll I had talked about. When I went home, I got rid of the doll and made a vow to never bring her up again. Except to this post. I will never be able to explain why the girls and I both got scratched. Most of the activity in my house is gone now, but something is just off every time I hear her name. Or anyone who remotely reminds me of the doll. One of the most evil things I have ever encountered was a little girl named Abby who was not a little girl. 3. It's just past 2 a.m., and I'm currently, as I type this, sitting in the middle of a remote field in North Carolina. Without giving too much detail, I'm in the military. You can infer as to which branch and base on your own. And my buddy Eddie and I are helping conduct a field exercise. We're not the ones training, we're the ones that get to sit in a field from 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., freezing our asses off and reading a pre-written script over the radio every 15 to 30 minutes, so that the guys working up for deployment can practice listening to enemy comms. After our last comm window, I call up my buddy at the other far end of the LZ to check in on him. I'd mentioned that as we had such frequent radio checks scheduled throughout the night, though the time stretched to about an hour apart at this point, and it was suggested that we try to get some sleep. I don't really trust myself to fall asleep because I regularly sleep through alarms or just autopilot hit the snooze button, like some half-conscious zombie. That's when he tells me, "Oh, trust me, I ain't sleeping tonight." The way he said that seemed odd, not like he was agreeing that he was afraid to sleep through his alarms, but like there was an entirely different reason that he'd also be pulling an all-nighter. So naturally, I asked him why. Now I'm really wishing I hadn't. He goes on to describe seeing a person walking up to him from the tall grass. Thinking it was simply one of the guys doing dismounted reconnaissance, and just not being very stealthy, he shined his headlamp on him. What he saw was a guy in full kit, wearing old BDUs, with his left arm missing and his head hanging lazily on his shoulder, as if it had been blown most of the way off. Eddie says the guy didn't look at him at all and walked straight into the tree line. He claims to have seen him clear as day. Now, Eddie and I aren't super close, but we're work friends. That said, we don't exactly have the dynamic to mess with each other like this, and I've never known him to be disingenuous. He sounded noticeably shaken, and I have no reason not to believe him. I've always believed in the supernatural to at least some extent, though to which I'm not sure. Though, I've never actually seen a ghost or anything out of the ordinary, to tell the truth. If I had, I surely didn't notice it. I've always wondered why some people seem to be so lucky where I was not. I sort of wondered this aloud on the phone with Eddie, noting that I'd either been on my phone or reading my book all night in between comm windows. Eddie suggested I keep reading or distracting myself in some manner, as the whole ordeal left him practically shitting his pants. Part of me is sort of jealous of him, if I'm being completely honest. I've always thought it'd be really cool to see something like that. Another part of me hopes I continue on with my night in blissful ignorance, peacefully unaware of the things that go bump in the night. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. At first, my only concern was sleeping through my alarms. Now I've got a whole new reason as to why I'll be wide awake. Thanks, Eddie. Four. I'm not sure how to start this, as I've never had to write this down. I've only ever spoken to my partner about it. Most of my life, I've seen things, whether it's shadows out of the corner of my eye, or just as I'm drifting to sleep, or felt the presence of something I can't see. I've been grabbed, shoved, and heard whispers. None of that compares to my frequent visitor for several years. Back in 2017, I was 23 years old. I had just broken up with a long-term girlfriend, and was in a bit of a bad place mentally. I spent a lot of time alone and in my own head. This is when the problem started. I was at my workplace at the time, using the urinal. I felt like someone was watching me, like a burning stare. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, and in the gap between the cubicle, I could swear for a brief moment I saw something. It appeared to be some sort of disheveled woman. Just as quickly as I saw it, it disappeared. I chalked this up to sleep deprivation. Didn't really think anything of it, so I just cleaned myself up and got back to work. I wish this was the end of it. Throughout the next few weeks, when I was by myself, I never really felt like I was by myself. That's when I caught her. I was sitting at my computer one evening, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw that same woman, peering at me around the corner of the door. As much as I try to remember, I've never been able to recall her face. I remember dirty grey hair and somewhat pale skin, but that's it. I froze up. I don't know how long I sat there staring back at her, and I don't remember her leaving. This persisted for years. I saw her at home. I saw her at work. I even swore I saw her in public. She was never in full view. She was always peering around a corner, like she just wanted to observe what I was doing, but peering enough that she wanted me to know that she was there. This changed one fateful night in 2015. The night my mother fell unwell and had to be rushed to hospital. I woke up feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on what was up. Suddenly I hear from the hall my mother's door burst open, and she's calling to me. She's passed out on the floor, semi-conscious and breathing heavily. After helping her up, I called an ambulance for her and sat with her. She asked me not to leave her as she felt in danger. I didn't leave her side until the paramedics arrived. Eventually they came. Agreed that my mother needed to go to the hospital, and I said I'll follow in my car. I ran back upstairs to get changed, as I had just thrown on some comfy clothes, and that's when I saw her. I rounded the corner of my bedroom, and in full view on the other side of the room was this thing. It was stood in full view. I still cannot recall its face, just the grey hair and the pale skin. I've never felt such dread. I kept my eyes locked on it as I grabbed clothes from my floor I was wearing the previous day and just backed out of the room while keeping my gaze locked on it. I was half expecting something like out of a horror movie, for it to just start sprinting at me with its arms outstretched. But nothing. It just stayed where it was. Even when I was walking downstairs from where my room was in full view, it was still stood there. When I came back home, it was gone. I slept downstairs for weeks. From that point, I still saw it peering around the corner a lot, but never in full view like before. I eventually moved out in 2021. Since then, I've had no more experiences with either that thing peering around the corner or anything else. I have nightmares about it occasionally, but nothing else. 5. My partner and I moved into this house in southern Ohio last November on a nature preserve. Starting in March, we often hear very strange sounds in the woods. It first happened when my roommate told me to come outside and stargaze with them. We were out there for about 10 minutes and started hearing a man in the woods singing. We are deep in the forest, and it was like 2 a.m., so it didn't make any sense that someone would be out that late singing loudly. It was also pitch black, and we didn't see any flashlights or headlamps, and there were no leaves on the trees yet, so we could see pretty far into the woods, and if someone had a light and was that close to us, we definitely would have been able to see it. Needless to say, we all immediately went inside. The best way I can explain how it sounds is if you've ever watched Over the Garden Wall, it literally sounded like the beast who sings in the woods. The next time we heard him was a few weeks later while we were having a fire. He didn't sing for very long, just a few seconds, and since we'd already heard him the first time and nothing bad happened, we stayed out to finish our fire and then went inside. After that, we didn't hear him again for a while. It wasn't until June that one of us heard him again, and it happened to be after a dream I had. In my dream, there was a little guy in a yellow raincoat, running around near the pond in our woods, and I was trying to focus my eyes on him. But he was so fast that I couldn't get a good look at him. For some reason, I felt that he was getting a kick out of that I couldn't perceive him fully, and I was getting frustrated about it. The next day, before I even told anyone about that, my partner heard the man singing again, this time in broad daylight. He wanted to get to the bottom of it and assumed a distant neighbor was messing with us. So he followed the voice into the woods. He was trying to be quiet and sneak up on the person, but every time he got close enough to almost see the person, the voice changed locations immediately. At one point, he said that he heard the singing so loudly that it had to be right around the corner of the trail he was on. So he jumped around the corner fast, and immediately the voice stopped. A few seconds later, it started up again all the way across the street in a whole different part of the woods that would take about 10 minutes to walk to by trail. For whatever reason compelled him, he decided to run over there as fast as he could, only for the singing voice to once again be even further away when he got there. At that point, he was very confused and returned home sweating and out of breath. He told me that he felt like the singing voice was enjoying messing with him, and that the reason he kept trying to get to it was because he was getting frustrated. It's now August 12th, and we heard him again tonight, once again only for a few seconds. It kind of felt like as soon as we recognized it, it stopped purposely. There are some other weird noises I've heard around the property as well. A few days ago, I was sitting at a picnic table on my phone and heard a distant neighbor yelling for their dog. Then on the other side of the woods, I heard someone mocking him in a higher-pitched voice. There was also one night when we were bringing our chickens in, because they decided to fall asleep on the porch. Every time we picked them up, they made surprise chicken noises. After we got them all in, we heard what sounded like a chicken choking in the woods. No, not like that. I've always been a skeptic with stuff like this, and I still am. But I'm open to the idea of things existing that we don't understand. These are all of the examples I can think of regarding the weird things we've experienced since moving here. I'm sure we will hear more soon. I'm honestly not too bothered by it at this point because nothing bad has happened. It just feels like we're being messed with. I think that we just have to ignore it, and hopefully it'll just get bored and eventually stop. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 342. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button, thank you kindly. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, then you can support me on Patreon for as little or as much as you like a month. You'll find the link to that in the description, along with the link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, which is currently on Teespring. Hopefully you'll find something you like. And if you'd like to support me on a more one-at-a-time basis, then you can leave donations on streams or videos, just like this one. While I do not require this, I do appreciate it, and it helps keep me going so I can keep making videos. Alrighty, let's see. I don't think there's any other business today. Nope, no shoutouts for this one. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is gravy. How often do you have gravy? I like gravy, but I've never made gravy from scratch. I am the buy it off the shelf and mix it up and maybe add a little bit, a little spices, maybe some Worcestershire sauce in there, depending on what I'm cooking, to jazz it up a little bit. But I've never felt inclined to go to the time and effort of making a gravy from scratch. And that goes for a lot of things that I enjoy, like custard as well. I love it. I'd rather just buy either a can or a packet, depending on what dessert I'm having, but that's a whole other discussion. So why don't you let me know what you think? Instant or made from scratch? What do you prefer? Or what do you do more often, if it's not a matter of preference? Let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.